I am a three-time loser. I voted for him three times. I believed in his vision. Now, I mean, everything is going wrong.
It looked good, like initially, and then it's like you woke up Monday morning and it's like, oh, we're bombing Iran now. Freaking gas is pushing $5 a gallon.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. It is not a good sign when some of your most loyal supporters start calling themselves losers for supporting you in the first place. That was part of a new focus group held by our friend Sarah Longwell of The Bulwark with Trump voters who feel abandoned and betrayed as Donald Trump ignores his campaign promises and doubles and triples down on the unpopular war with Iran.
A sitting Republican, someone who voted for Donald Trump 3 different times, stood up and called him insane, not confused, not simply wrong, not just speaking out of turn, insane. And the most disturbing part is not only that the word came from within Trump's own political world, the most disturbing part is what came next: complete silence. No serious pushback from the Republican Party, no meaningful public response, no moment of accountability. And Lawrence O'Donnell's larger point about the 25th Amendment sits at the center of this conversation. The 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967 for one very specific constitutional purpose. It exists for the moment when the individual holding the most powerful office in the world is no longer capable of performing the duties of that office. Now let's see why Trump disappearing from public view became such a major warning sign.
Okay, so can we just talk about how unbelievably weird this whole Trump situation was yesterday? Because honestly, if this had happened under literally any other president, especially Joe Biden, the media would have gone into full nuclear meltdown mode for like 48 straight hours. Here's what happened. Trump was supposed to appear at the White House with Brazilian President Lula for a press event that had already been.
And now the Democratic leader in the Senate is publicly describing the President of the United States as unstable, while Republicans refuse to openly acknowledge what critics suspect may already be discussed privately behind closed doors. What stands out most is the sheer hypocrisy. These are the same political voices who spent years obsessing over Biden's age, building campaign narratives around cognitive decline, replaying every verbal stumble, every awkward pause, every public misstep. But now, when their own candidate disappears from public view for 3 straight days, silence suddenly takes over, and that absence matters. This was not an ordinary quiet weekend. This was not Trump casually taking time off. Donald Trump does not disappear from public attention. This is a man who has spent decades chasing cameras. This next clip shows the report that made Trump's absence look even more concerning.
Heart failure, kidney disease, liver issues, dementia. We need to know the truth about what's actually going on with Donald Trump's health. On Thursday and Friday, no one in the press pool saw him. He was MIA. He basically disappeared. What the hell is going on here? Now, Caroline Levitt, Donald Trump's chief propagandist, says what's really going on here is CVI, chronic venous insufficiency, a condition where the veins in the legs struggle to pump blood back to the heart, causing fluid to pool and the legs to swell. By the way, CVI is a serious condition in and of itself.
He has stopped Marine One in bad weather just to speak with reporters. He calls into cable news late at night. He once held a press conference inside a McDonald's. Public attention is part of his political identity. And then suddenly, he vanished. 3 full days without a public appearance, while at the same time posting roughly 50 times on Truth Social, attacking Iran, Apple, Democrats, NATO allies, and repeating election narratives. 50 online posts, but no appearance in front of cameras. That immediately raises a question. Were the people around him worried about what the public might see if he stepped outside? The article that triggered these concerns described Trump, at 79 years old, staying out of public view for 3 days amid broader questions about instability. Now let's look at the nuclear allegation that escalated everything.
Donald Trump has been blocked from using nuclear codes against Iran. Talk us through what is circulating.
Well, Well, Sharon, former CIA analyst Larry Johnson alleged on a podcast this week that Donald Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes against Iran, but that he was blocked from doing so by General Dan Kane, the chairman of his Joint Chiefs of Staff. So let's take a listen now directly to those claims that we heard in this podcast this week.
They had an emergency meeting Saturday night. And apparently, well, one report coming out of that meeting at the White House is that Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes.
It noted that his last public appearance had been Saturday morning at the White House, where he signed an executive order directing regulators to speed up review of psychedelic treatments. Later that day, he went to his golf club in Virginia, but after that, the usually camera-seeking president remained entirely behind closed doors. Instead of appearing publicly, he made phone calls to reporters and posted or reposted more than 50 times on Truth Social. The report connected that absence to growing concerns over increasingly erratic behavior, aggressive online posts, confusion around Iran negotiations, and angry attacks aimed at multiple targets. Then came the report involving nuclear access, which made the conversation even more alarming. A Newsweek report highlighted comments from Larry Johnson, a retired CIA analyst, who claimed Trump attempted to access the nuclear codes but was stopped by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is where the conversation becomes bigger than one report.
Now, there's also been reports that Trump was, in fact, intentionally excluded from the Situation Room during the recent critical operation in Iran to rescue US airmen there. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump was in such a volatile state that, I quote, he spent hours screaming at aides in the West Wing. Military officials made the call to limit his access and update him only when needed on the phone.
25th Amendment versus military restraint constitutional crisis. That is an extraordinary allegation, direct, alarming, and deeply serious. A former intelligence official publicly suggested that the president attempted to access nuclear authority and was physically stopped by military leadership. To be absolutely clear, this remains an unverified claim and has not been broadly confirmed across major reporting, so it should not be treated as established fact. But critics focus on it because they believe it fits into a larger pattern: the disappearance from public view, the aggressive posting, confusion about J.D. Vance's whereabouts, conversations with reporters where Trump allegedly seemed unclear, and uncertainty surrounding foreign negotiations. In the minds of critics, those events together form a troubling picture. Because if military leadership is quietly stepping in as a restraint, that should concern everyone. Now watch the moment Trump reportedly needed correction about J.D. Vance.
And of course, I want to thank our next Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, wherever he may be. There's a lot of people. Wherever the hell he is, he's here someplace. It's a lot of people. It's a little tough when you say, where is he? You got a lot of people in here.
That would mean the constitutional safeguard is not the cabinet, not the vice president invoking the 25th Amendment, not Congress performing oversight. It would mean informal military resistance behind closed doors is becoming the barrier against escalation. Critics argue that is not how constitutional governance is supposed to work. That is improvisation around a potentially unstable presidency. That is crisis management, not normal government. The confusion was not limited to nuclear claims. Trump reportedly told reporters by phone that J.D. Vance was in the air, only for Vance to later appear at the White House. Caroline Leavitt reportedly corrected him in real time. Think about that. A press secretary correcting the president because he could not keep a basic fact straight during the conversation. Here is where critics say responsibility expands beyond Trump. This is the person responsible for foreign policy, military coordination, economic tensions, and major global negotiations. Yet critics argue he appeared confused about where his own vice president was. There is a version of this story that invites sympathy. A 79-year-old man may simply no longer be fully capable of handling a job this demanding, surrounded by people who treat him as a symbolic figure while managing the machinery of power themselves. But critics immediately answer with the same point. Trump chose this. He chose to run again. He fought to return to office. And now, in this narrative, the people around him appear to be carefully managing him, limiting exposure, controlling appearances, feeding him decisions, and allegedly relying on military restraint to prevent impulsive catastrophe. Now let's look at the Vietnam comments critics seized on. Critics say that is not a normal presidency, And in that framing, the responsibility extends beyond Trump himself. Trump has always behaved like Trump. The sharper criticism is directed at Republicans who allegedly saw warning signs, heard concerns, understood the risks, and chose silence anyway. Then came another moment critics seized on: Trump's Vietnam comments. Trump reportedly claimed he would have won the Vietnam War quickly. This is a man who received 5 military deferments during that era. The war lasted 19 years. More than 58,000 Americans died. It reshaped generations of American history. And now Trump is reportedly claiming he could have ended it quickly. This next part shows why critics hear dangerous fantasy thinking. Rhetoric and stability concerns intensify. He also reportedly claimed he took Venezuela over in 45 minutes, then changed the timeline, then changed it again. Critics focus less on factual precision and more on the thinking behind the statements. When Trump says he could have won Vietnam in a week or taken over a country in less than an hour, critics argue he is not speaking like someone discussing real strategy, diplomacy, logistics, or military planning. They hear fantasies of overwhelming force. And when critics ask what kind of force could realistically end a 19-year war that quickly, the implications become deeply unsettling. This is the same man who previously used rhetoric about eliminating Iranian civilization. Critics argue that language went far beyond conventional diplomacy. Finally, this is the constitutional question critics keep asking. And if those remarks were not tactical rhetoric, then critics see them as dangerous outbursts, especially when placed next to claims involving nuclear authority and military restraint. That is why the 25th Amendment keeps returning to the discussion. It was not created for unpopular presidents, not for controversial leaders. It was designed for a president genuinely unable to discharge the duties of office. Unable, not unwilling. And now, in the critics' framing, a Democratic Senate leader is discussing it publicly. A Republican Trump voter used alarming language publicly. Alleged military restraint is being discussed privately, and staff behavior is being interpreted as protective containment. The constitutional question becomes obvious. At what point does the cabinet act? At what point does J.D. Vance, regardless of politics, recognize his constitutional role if the presidency is no longer functioning normally? Critics answer with skepticism. They argue the people around Trump are motivated by access, influence, proximity to power, and personal gain. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president plus a majority of the cabinet, which means coordinated political courage from people critics do not believe will provide it. So where does that leave the country according to this narrative? With alleged generals saying no privately, staff carefully managing appearances, extraordinary claims from former intelligence voices, and a 79-year-old president posting dozens of times online while aides attempt to keep the machinery moving. It leaves two powerful images side by side, constitutional experts explaining why the 25th Amendment exists, and Trump making grand claims about Vietnam.